Congressman, thank you. Beautiful. I just had a vision of a year ago. Dr. Carrie Teplinsky was not only my father's cardiologist, but a dear friend who was with the Asa family until the very end of Abba's life. He was the person that gave my father the medical care that allowed him to live long enough, those extra few days, until all 4 of his children arrived from different corners of the earth to say goodbye. A very special person, Dr. Carrie Teplinsky. Thank you.
I always wanted to follow the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. So this really is a dream come true today. And we would be remiss to not mention that we were only 15 minutes late in starting, which I think is pretty good for Elaine's family. I first met Chaim about 25 years ago when I moved to Orange County, and I was a young cardiologist, fresh out of training, and he was a chaplain at Martin Luther Hospital, but he decided he wanted to switch his care to me. And twice in my life, I'm really rather anal about not being late for my patients. And twice in my life, I have had patients have to leave because I was in the middle of an emergency or I had some obligation. I couldn't make it back on time. The first time was my initial appointment with Chaim, which is not something you want to do. And the only other time I ever missed an appointment with a patient was a year ago at Chaim's funeral. And I wasn't able to get back in time to see the patient. So I thought it was kind of ironic that the whole loop closed like that. Now, Chaim eventually did become my patient, so he went from being an acquaintance to becoming a patient, and then he went to becoming a friend. And it's generally my practice that I don't want to take care of friends for a variety of reasons, and I think most of you can probably understand why that's the case. But Chaim was somebody that I just couldn't let anybody else take care of. I had to take care of him. I don't know what it was that drew me to him. I remember back before his kidneys ever failed, back when we were considering whether or not he was going to have transplant, and shortly thereafterwards, he got so sick. He had the operation. He was in St. Jude's Hospital. In the intensive care unit he was in the intensive care unit for a long time. I remember visiting him over there with Elaine and Aviva, and eventually he made his way back to the hospital that I work at, and everybody was willing to give up on Chaim. Nobody thought Chaim would make it. But I just didn't think it was Chaim's time yet, and I just wouldn't let them give up on Chaim, and I'm not sure why that was, and I'm not trying to flatter myself in any way, shape, or form. There was just something about him. Of course, he never gave up. He fought for everything. And of course, he survived that, eventually went on to be on dialysis, and then Sandy and I and our daughter Tasha moved to Jerusalem. And I had the great pleasure of visiting Chaim in the dialysis center in Jerusalem, because eventually he couldn't travel anywhere without having dialysis set up in advance. And he's actually the first, last, and only dialysis patient I've ever sat with during a dialysis session, certainly in Jerusalem, let alone here. And Chaim's first words to me always were, "So how's Sandy?" I could never even get a word out of my mouth before he started asking about my family. And sometimes he would counsel, and sometimes he would, just listen. He was very encouraging. My wife is an author. Chaim was always encouraging her in her work. I went to a conference to hear him speak one time about the Torah scrolls, about some of the many Torah scrolls that he had. And he stood before everybody there and he said, "You must read this book." It was Sandy's book, and I'm sure he disagreed with 80% of what was in it, because we didn't necessarily think alike about certain things. But still, he was always so encouraging and endorsing. And then, of course, as he got sicker, I got to spend more time with he and Elaine, and our family spent time together. And I got to see something in the Asa family that helped me understand why I was so drawn to Chaim. It was just a type of love that we don't get to see very often, not just in the medical community, really in the world. They still exude something that I'm sure most of you have had the privilege to see. And then a little over a year ago, I had just gotten back from Israel, and one of my partners asked me to come in on a Sunday to help him with a procedure that he needed help with. It was a 2-person procedure. And Chaim was in a bed about 5 doors down from him. And during the procedure, the nurses announced, there was an emergency in the ICU. And I stuck my head out and asked who it was, and they said it was, Rabbi Asa. And so at that point, I just said, "You're on your own," and I left and ran into the room, and Eliana and Elaine were there, and it was not a good time for Chaim. And there were lots of other doctors around, and they were doing all the right clinical things, and basically they were ready to say it was time. Chaim had died. And I said, "No, I know this man. Get out of the room. I'm going to take care of him." And it was really a precious thing. I wouldn't let anybody else take care of Chaim. And as Leora mentioned, that Sunday turned into a few days, and children started to arrive from around the world. And at Chaim's last, we were all, I count it a privilege, and I'm sure that Miriam counts it a privilege also, as somebody who wasn't in the family, to be able to be there when Chaim died. And before Chaim died, Eliana said to him, "Abba, bless Carrie." And he stuck his hand out in his weakened state, and he just said the Aaronic benediction over me, and I just felt like, what a blessing to have been able to be part of his life, and it's something that I hold forever. So not everybody, not every family gets to be around their loved one at the moment of their passing. And we never know when that's going to be, but I was just so blessed to be able to be part of the precious Asa family during that moment. Thank you.
Yo. Thank you. Ah, somebody agreed with you back there. We're starting to get the pieces together, starting to see a beautiful picture, which is the life that I think we as a family have lived, and been blessed with so many friends and family to share it with. Aaron Cohen is a childhood friend of my father's from Bulgaria. They each made Aliyah to Israel separately in the 1940s, but did not know of each other's whereabouts. Decades later, my Uncle Harvey, over there, in a chance meeting with Aaron in Los Angeles, began to talk about Bulgaria and mentioned that his brother-in-law was also Bulgarian. Now I'm going to make little quotes. You're going to correct me if I'm incorrect. But, "Oh really?" says Aaron. "And what's his name?" My uncle replied, "Zahavi-Asa." And Aaron fell silent, as the story goes. Upon recovering, Aaron shared that they used to play together in Bulgaria. And in the early 80s, they were reunited and worked on many Bulgarian projects together. Aaron Cohen, thank you.
When Elaine told me that I can say a few words, we people from Bulgaria, it takes us 5 minutes to say hello. When I was 10 years old, I was in Bulgaria going to a Hebrew school. This is before the upheaval started in Bulgaria. So they took us in a field trip, and we, of course, went to the Black Sea. And I was 10 years old, and I wound up in the house of Rabbi Asa. He had the most impressive parents. His mother was stunningly beautiful. His father was a very impressive man. And we were having dinner, and of course his mother started asking me questions. "What's your name?" I said, "Aaron Cohen." "And what's your mother's name?" "Esther Cohen." And she stopped. She said, "No, wait a minute. I went to school, and I have to understand, I was in Bulgaria for two ladies to go to high school at that time, right after World War I. It was very unusual. You graduated high school in Bulgaria, you may as well graduate the Sorbonne." So she looked at me, she says to me, "Well, Esther Cohen, I went to school with her, but that was her maiden name." And I said, "My mother's maiden name was Esther." And my uncle was a very prominent in Bulgaria at that time. He was the first Bulgarian president of a Franco-Bulgarian bank. The second question was, he says, "Do you have an uncle by the name of David?" I said, "Yeah, I do." He said, "Do you have a name?" Anyway, it's very short. They went to school together. Don't forget, those days they didn't have emails or telephones, so they had lost track of each other. So she gives me a letter, and I take it to my saintly mother, and shortly after that they came and they visited us. They visited us in Plovdiv. Now, I slept the night that night with Chaim. Now, Chaim, since he was a kid, he had a sense of humor. When we go to sleep, in Bulgarian, you say, "lekanosht," which means have a light night. He looked at me and he said, "Why do you say lekanosht? Have a teshkanosht." I said, "Well, heavy light." That was Chaim and I met after that. Now, I was 10 years old. Now, our paths separated. Hello, okay. Bulgarians, they have to talk with their hands too, So our paths separated. He moved to Israel, at that time Palestine, and me, in 13, there was a movement which is called the Youth Aliyah, and they sent me that time to Palestine. We both fought the war. It was in a different area, we never met. And then I was married to a lovely lady, and she had friends by the name of Harvey and Susan, alayhi shalom. So we go to dinner with them, and Harvey started, "You have an accent." I said, "Me, accent?" Said, "Come on." So he said to me, "Where are you from?" I said, "Bulgaria." Anyway, she told you, this is when Chaim and I met. We bonded. He was my brother. We went on a very important mission to restore the knowledge that Bulgaria was able to save 50,000 Jews, which was totally unknown as the communists squelched it. And we embarked on that mission, and we formed a committee, and we really worked very hard. Chaim was a man that he fit everywhere. I was honored by the United States Marines. He was there. He gave the invocation. They loved him. The king came here. We were the Crystal Cathedral. With the Crystal Cathedral, he fit. Chaim could fit any place, anywhere. And my assistant, who is with me 33 years, absolutely adored him, loved him. Every time he would come to the office, she would come and say, God, he's truly a God's man. He was loved. We did a lot of work together. We were brothers. He will be missed. And thank you for listening.